Many teams, including the Broncos, Raiders, and Cowboys, have multiple needs at offensive skill player positions entering the draft. But which position do they need most? We discuss biggest team draft needs on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network. Vinny's not here with us again today, but I am joined by Kate Magdziuk. She is back with us. We had an awesome show yesterday if you missed that. She is the co-host of the Locked On Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast, and of course, my wife. Thanks for joining us again today, Kate. We have a fun episode today. We're getting closer and closer to the draft. Now, I think we're only 8 days away, almost just a week away from the draft. And we've gotten through free agency. We've gotten through a chunk of this offseason. And there's still a handful of teams with very clear needs on offense, especially at the skill positions. But some of these teams need multiple positions very badly. And we're here to decide which one they need the most. So let's get into that. And we're going to start with teams here at the beginning that need running back or wide receiver. Basically, they need both, but we're going to decide which one they need more. Let's start with the Raiders. I do think this is a close question, whether they need running back or wide receiver more. Which side are you leaning on?
I'm definitely leaning wide receiver here. Now, I know they have Brock Bowers. I know they have Jacoby Myers, who I think is, generally speaking, an underrated NFL wide receiver. You look at the running back situation. They've got Raheem Mostert, Zamir White, Dylan Lobby. The names on either side aren't fantastic. But I do think in general, if you're going to trade and pay, and even comparatively, the contract for Geno Smith it's not necessarily breaking the bank, but let's get them a little bit more in terms of weaponry. They need a true boundary threat along the outside that I just don't think they have right now between Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers.
Listen, I'm with you. They need another wide receiver. Their wide receiver room outside of Jacoby Myers is atrocious. I mean, Trey Tucker, Ramel, Kate, I can't even say these names because I've never even heard of them. Keaton, Alex Backman, the Christian Wilkerson, names that just should not be guys 2 through 6 on your roster. I get it, but with Brock Bowers there and Jacoby Myers, I do think the bigger need is at running back in the first round. Obviously, they have to take wide receivers later in the draft to try to hit on some, but they average a league low 79.8 rushing yards per game last year and 3.6 yards per carry, both worse than the NFL. They're the only team to average fewer than 90 rushing yards per game. And again, they're at 79.8. And you brought up the names of Raheem Mostert and Sincere McCormick. They don't have anyone that can lead this backfield right now. And we know Pete Carroll loves his running backs. I think how about the passing game? They need to have some threat of a good running game. And right now it's looking like it would be the absolute worst in the league yet again. So I do think running back is key there for me. I would go running back.
See,
now, sorry.
I will say there's just more depth at running back in this class. So you might come back in round 2 and you could still get a top 5 running back in this class, right? You can't do that at the wide receiver position, not in this particular class. So when I'm thinking about just general draft strategy, I think there's more depth at running back. And I don't know, wouldn't I rather get the best wide receiver available than get maybe the best running back, which is more of, generally an easier position to replace and the position that has more depth here.
I will say when the running back option for the Raiders would be Ashton Genty, who is one of the best prospects in the
I mean, that'll be hard to pass up. Yeah.
Yeah. So that makes it a little bit different. Now, what about the Cowboys? They also have a massive need at running back. I know they signed Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders, but there's a reason why they were, their teams didn't want them anymore. Javonte Williams has been worse and worse every year of his career. Miles Sanders has just fallen off the face of the earth. I'm not saying they can't get back to some type of form, but the Cowboys need a much better running back situation. They lost both of Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, Elliott was pointless. They're going to lose him anyways, but they lost Dowdle. He was their by far best running back last year. They have nobody. I think with CeeDee Lamb still being, I mean, what is he, a top 3 wide receiver in the league, top 5 at the
Absolutely.
worst? With that there, you don't need someone amazing to bring in. They do need to take some shots in the middle rounds, but running back is where they're desperately needing somebody.
Yeah, the running back position is definitely a need. And I do think under Brian Schottenheimer, we are going to see more of a run heavy approach here for the Dallas Cowboys. And you just can't necessarily, you know, establish that run, I think, without a true sort of anchor there. Now, they're picking at 12. So we already mentioned the Raiders who are picking earlier, who could be a great fit for Ashton Genty. But I mean, if Ashton Genty is available to the Cowboys at 12, I think you run the pick up to the podium. But because of the fact that he hasn't been commonly available in most mock drafts at that point, we are seeing a lot of wide receivers go to the Cowboys. And I mean, again, we mentioned the need is on, both parts here. Jalen Tolbert, Cavante Turpin, Jonathan Mingo. No. But I do think because CeeDee Lamb is so elite and because you can utilize him all over the formation. You're going to primarily work him out of the slot, but like you can do a little bit of everything with CeeDee Lamb. I just think that gives the edge to the running back.
Yeah, me too. And that doesn't mean they have to go running back in the first round, because if Genty's gone, that's mean they're a little bit reaching on Amarian Hampton there. They would have to really like him. Maybe they can move down. But the next team we're going to talk about, I think if Amarian Hampton's sitting there at number 20, where the Broncos are selecting, or 20, they're number 20, right?
Yeah.
I think that has to be the pick, because yes, they have a need at wide receiver as well across from Cortland Sutton, but they do still have Marvin Mims, who I don't feel like they use enough. I think he's a good talent. They drafted Troy Franklin last year in the 4th. I think he can take a step forward. And the key here is their addition with Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram is like another wide receiver out there. It's not like he's killing it as a blocker tight end, right? So they added another receiving weapon already for Bo Nix. The running back situation, I mean, right now their starters, Jaleel McLaughlin. I do think running back in the first round, if Hampton's sitting there, has to be their pick.
Yeah, and I do think that the Broncos are in a position where it doesn't feel like as much of a luxury pick at this point. You do have your franchise quarterback for now, right? You have a couple of, I think, decently high upside weapons there in the receiving game. Like, do they need depth? Absolutely. But again, that's something that I think maybe for your wide receiver 2/3, like you can come in the second round, third round, and take some of these shots on maybe some other depth positions. Whereas if you're picking at 20 and you have the opportunity for Amarian Hampton, who's the consensus RB2 in this class, that feels like a nice value for me there.
It does. And I'm really excited to see who lands with the Broncos, because it's such a good landing spot. It really is, with Sean Payton and with that offense, and Bo Nix taking that next step forward, and the targets available there as well. So I would love that for fantasy, and that would make Hampton a very enticing fantasy asset, even in his rookie season. We're going to get to teams that now they're going to be choosing between what's their biggest need, between wide receiver or tight end when they get to the draft. We have 4 teams to discuss there, starting with the Seahawks. We'll get to that right after a quick break. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip: add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, we have the next little debate here between wide receiver or tight end. And we're going to start with the Seahawks. And the Seahawks did add Cooper Kupp in Marquez Valdez-Scantling in this offseason after losing
Ooh.
DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. But and they still have Noah Fant. So this might seem like, do they desperately need either position? I feel like they do when it comes to adding a receiver. I think they do have a big need there. And I actually lean the tight end route. I think they can
What?
definitely. Yeah, I think Noah Fant has never had more than 500 receiving yards with the Seahawks. He has 1 touchdown over the last 2 years. A Seahawks tight end hasn't hit even 600 receiving yards in a season since 2016 with Jimmy Graham. Like, I do think tight end's the bigger need.
I think that's fair. And I think part of my question mark about like what do the Seahawks need more is a little contingent on like how do they envision utilizing Jackson Smith and Jigba, right? Like for the most part last year, he played 83.6% of snaps out of the or ran 83.6% of his routes out of the slot in 2024. Now, I thought coming out, obviously, he is more of that like possession option over the middle of the field, playing out of the slot. But I don't think he doesn't necessarily have the capabilities and the skill set to play some more outside. So I just, for me, like the bigger need comes along the boundary. What is your threat on the boundary? I don't really see one at this point. Whereas at least JSN's manning the middle of the field. You also have Noah Fant, who, like you said, not like a red zone threat, but 500 receiving yards last season, also working the middle of the field. It just feels like the sides of the field are just kind of barren right now for the Cowboys or for the Seahawks for me.
I'll say, so let's say they're on the clock, right? And they're sitting there and they have either the choice of Matthew Golden or Colston Loveland. What way would you go?
I mean, Colston Loveland.
I knew you
Colston
love
Loveland's like
Loveland.
the better player, right? Like Colston
Yeah.
Loveland is, I would argue, the better receiving option. Like he's a giant, big-bodied wide receiver, and that's what you're getting out of Colston Loveland. You're getting the size component. You're getting an elite ability to separate. Like that feels like a much bigger edge than Matthew Golden, who doesn't have the production profile, doesn't necessarily have a ton of advanced metrics that would lead you to believe that he's going to translate to the next level. He disappears far too often. Like, I just think Loveland would be the much more consistent threat and is a better football player.
Yeah, I agree there too. But I also think the Seahawks could utilize a tight end better than another wide receiver at this moment. They have to add more wide receivers, but I think in the first round, tight end gets really, really enticing for the Seahawks. So I think they need to upgrade, even though they have Noah Fant and he's a name still. I still think they need a big upgrade there at tight end. Now, moving on to the Jaguars, they lost Evan Ingram this year, right? So they could be thinking tight end early. They traded away Christian Kirk, and it's Brian Thomas Jr., who's amazing as a rookie, and then a bunch of Diami Brown, Parker Washington, Gabe Davis. Like you're okay with those guys being wide receiver 3s, but they still need a wide receiver 2. And then how good do they feel about Bretton Strange at tight end as their starter, who they took in the second round back in 2023? Strange was actually second on this team last year in receiving yards, only with 411. But I will say, I think they need to go wide receiver. I think they need to add another weapon with Brian Thomas Jr. for Trevor Lawrence. I think Bretton Strange can continue to grow. And I think he's good enough to be a starter for just this year. And maybe they take another shot on a tight end in the middle rounds and maybe they hit. But I think they need to focus on wide receiver. And I think this could be the first possible landing spot for a guy like Teteroa McMillan. Maybe it's a little too high at number 5 overall. But I think Brian Thomas Jr. and McMillan together would be dangerous.
Oh, absolutely. And they are such different players. Like, Brian Thomas Jr. going to win with that speed. Obviously, one of the biggest knocks on Teteroa McMillan has been like that lack of top end speed, but you're giving Trevor Lawrence like a very tall, big bodied receiver that can make some of those jump balls look easy. And I do think that prioritizing getting Trevor Lawrence as many weapons as possible like needs to be the focus if he's going to be your franchise quarterback, because it feels like they've tried to piece some value together, but it it hasn't panned out. I think it's time to swing for the fences and get him the best, give him the Jamar Chase T Higgins sort of combination that might elevate him to looking more like the prospect they thought they drafted in round 1.
And they paid him already, right? They're stuck with him. They paid him. You got to do whatever you can to make sure that you're making it possible he can hit his ceiling. So yes, I'm going wide receiver there. And then the Chargers, wide receiver, a tight end. And I know everyone would love a tight end with the Chargers, right? For fantasy. If Justin Herbert gets his tight end in the first round and Colston Loveland, or if Tyler Warren were to fall or something like that, it would be huge for fantasy. We'd be super excited. However, I think their bigger need is wide receiver. They did add Tyler Conklin in free agency. Not super exciting, don't get me wrong, but he's good enough to start for the year. They still have Will Disley if he gets ever, when he's healthy. He's fine. It's a fine room. It's not good, but it's doable. Their wide receiver room, it's Ladd McConkey. They're really trying to make Quentin Johnson a thing, but he's still, even though he was much better last year, he's still disappointed far too much. They added back Mike Williams, but he looks like his knees are shot. Jalen Reagor, like they desperately need wide receivers. They lost Josh Palmer in free agency. It can't just be Ladd McConkey, who's a skinny guy, who's a possession guy. They need more oomph there in that room.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned sort of like the skinny, Ladd McConkey. He's also not been perfectly healthy throughout his career, both in college and got banged up enough over, the past season too. I think when you look at the wide receiver room and you say, okay, what happens if Ladd McConkey isn't available? Because again, injury history has been a factor in your evaluation of Ladd McConkey. If he's not there, what do you have? And if the answer is nothing, that's when it might be time to evaluate your depth at the position. And I do think like Greg Roman, he has experience, generating touches for tight ends. He, orchestrated an offense that very much focused on, Mark Andrews and making him a viable threat in the red zone. But you can't do that at wide receiver if you don't have the weapons to do it.
Yeah, I mean, they need weapons in general, and I won't be mad if they go tight end early. I won't be, because it'll be great for fantasy, and especially if they're going to be the second target on the team or expected second target. But I think the bigger need for Justin Herbert and this offense is getting him another wide receiver. Now, one last team here for wide receiver or tight end, and we can even add in quarterback here. It's the Jets. They added Justin Fields. They added Josh Reynolds, I guess, if we want to say him at wide receiver. They lost Tyler Conklin, and right now their tight end room is the worst in the league by far. Jeremy Rucker and Stone Smart are their top two tight ends on the roster. I mean, atrocious tight end room. But is that their biggest need? Because it's really Garrett Wilson and a bunch of meh players. Maybe Malachi Corley can take a step forward in a second year. And then you have Justin Herbert or Justin Fields at quarterback. What one is their biggest need? Because I don't think it's actually quarterback right now.
I don't think it's quarterback. I think you are giving yourself, by signing, Justin Fields to this 2-year deal, I think you're giving yourself a little bit of time to not only evaluate, like we've said, first round quarterbacks, they can have kind of a long leash, because maybe if it doesn't work out with the first team, maybe it's going to work out with the second team. And maybe if you make it to like a third team, they're like, well, I could fix him. Like I know the traits. I feel like I can fix him with my system. So they give themselves some time to not only evaluate that, but maybe look forward to the 2026 quarterback class, which might offer just a little bit more upside than you're going to find here in this position group. So I like the idea of them passing at quarterback. I think what would be a really intriguing move is Tyler Warren, who literally can do just about everything for an NFL offense, did a little bit of everything in college. Like, he can contribute as a receiver, as a blocker, as a passer, literally throwing touchdowns. Like, he can do everything for your offense. So like, imagine Garrett Wilson along the outside, and then you have Tyler Warren, who can play a little bit of all of those roles, I think that would be a really cool fit,
It would
especially with
be,
Justin Fields knowing his mobility.
yeah, it would be a great fit. And I do think Kyler Warren is an option. I think the Jets will be considering him there. That would be fun as well. So we have 3 more teams to discuss, but their 2 needs are running back or tight end. And we will let you know which one we think is more important for them to grab early in the draft right after we hear from another one of our sponsors. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. They have so many options, and the app is so easy to use. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same game parlay for a chance to win. If you don't want to get in on player props, they also have great game action too. If you just want to watch the game and root for a team, especially with the NBA playoffs coming up, I like the Timberwolves to take down the Lakers in their series at plus 164. I like the Nuggets to take down the Clippers in their first playoff series at plus 100. So those are some options for you for your first $5 bet. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. All right, let's get into running back or tight end for teams that have a need at both of those positions. And this first team I'm bringing up might be kind of a surprise to some people, the Commanders, because yes, they did re-sign Zach Ertz, but he's getting old. And yes, they have Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler, but I still think like they're in a position right now where they can upgrade their backfield. I think that would be huge for them. So that's where I'm leaning. Like, I think they need to upgrade their backfield.
Yeah, I think the backfield's the way to go here. And you didn't even mention soon-to-be second-year tight end Ben Sinnott, who is one of my favorite tight end prospects in last year's class. Now,
I gave an eye roll for those of you not watching the screen. You love Ben Sinnott.
I do love Ben Sinnott. Now, I'm not saying I love Ben Sinnott for what he did as a rookie.
5 receptions for 28 yards. You don't love that?
And a touchdown, Michelle. Mm-hmm. But I love the athlete, first of all. So, like, when we're talking about, tight ends and potential hit rates, etc., a lot of what we're looking at, we love a nice, athletic, big build tight end. We also love the production profile over his final 2 seasons at Kansas State, over 1,000 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns. Not bad for a collegiate tight end. And yeah, he kind of fits the bill for both of those. So I'm saying if I'm the Commanders, I'm going to give myself the luxury of time. I'm going to keep working on my rookie or my soon to be second year tight end Ben Sinnott. We have Zach Ertz as kind of this stopgap option to further evaluate our second round tight end from last year. I don't think you can give up on Sinnott that quickly.
Yeah, and you could just upgrade. Like Brian Robinson Jr. is just a guy. He's not like his efficiency is not great. He's not a explosive guy. He's not going to do exciting things as a pass catcher. Austin Eckler is getting older. I think like upgrading that backfield could really bring this offense to the next level. And then like with Jaden Daniels, man, it would be a great thing for them. Now, moving on to the Chiefs, they have needs at both running back and tight end. They did bring back Kareem Hunt. They have they signed Elijah Mitchell too, but Elijah Mitchell's never healthy. And then, of course, they still have Isaiah Pacheco. I do think they need to upgrade at running back for sure. However, with Travis Kelce already considering retirement, how important tight end is in this offense, and also Travis Kelce's age too with the retirement and him slowing down. I think tight end's the way to go. And if this would be the Chiefs' luck if Colston Loveland were to fall to them at 31, it would be so irritating. But I mean, what a great pick that would be for them.
I think it would be a great pick. I do think when you have the luxury of having the best quarterback in the league who can make, all kinds of throws, it does make the running back position just a little bit more tempting. I think in general, I'm looking at Kansas City as a team that they just have not been able to find their identity in the run whatsoever. And I know people really like Isaiah Pacheco. I think he's so fun to watch, when he's healthy and on the field, but he has not been a guy that you've been able to give, 20 plus touches per game to. He just hasn't. He struggled with health, averaged 3.6 yards per attempt this past season. That gets really difficult. So for me, the tiebreaker is going to come down to the health status of Rashee Rice and what we think he's going to bring in the year to come, because he's also sort of this zone beater for the Kansas City Chiefs, much in similar to a way that, Travis Kelce does. He just finds these soft spots in the zone, and him and Patrick Mahomes have these great connections. Rashee Rice does that too, but he just suffered a pretty devastating knee injury, and he's got some disciplinary things that we still need to figure out. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and give the edge to tight end.
Okay. So we're on the same page there. And then last one, Texans. Their rooms are interesting. They're running back and tight end rooms because there's a viable guy sitting there as a starter in both of them, with Dalton Schultz at tight end, with Joe Mixon at running back. And then even at tight end, Brevin Jordan's a fine tight end too. They have Cade Stover, who they took in the 4th round last year. Maybe he takes a step forward. Running back, it's Joe Mixon, Dare Ogunbowale, and then Dameon Pierce, where I do think Joe Mixon has enough in him to make it one more year. He started amazingly in the last year, right? And then it slowed down, especially after his ankle injury. But I'll say, I don't think it really matters who the running back is behind that line until they fix the line. Now, this answer might be offensive line, right? But for tight end, they lost so many receivers this year, with Stephon Diggs leaving, with Tank Dell. I can't imagine he comes back this year after that knee injury. And Dalton Schultz just doesn't get it done, right? He's not exciting. He's a fine tight end. He's a fine receiving tight end, but he's going to get you about 10 yards per reception at best. I do think that could be an area where it doesn't even have to be that Dalton Schultz can't be on the field anymore. Play more 12 personnel. I think that might be the way to go for the Texans this year, especially with their line being so bad. Just get bigger.
Yeah, that could be a Band-Aid for the offensive line for sure.
Yeah, so I'm going tight end.
I like that. And I do think, again, they're picking at 25, so I don't necessarily know that they're going to have the luxury of a Colston Loveland falling to them. Maybe they do, but I think in general, Colston Loveland, he's going to be more of that receiving threat than he is going to be a blocker. So I don't know, but I do think they definitely need an option over the middle of the field. You mentioned Tank Dell's injury. Absolutely devastating. I don't think they're even planning for him to see the football field or look at a football field in 2025. I do think it's a great insurance policy. Plus, a guy like Colston Loveland, we've already talked about him. He's essentially a big-bodied wide receiver. And with the pieces they've lost there, I think running back is going to be a little bit easier to replace for them than some of these targets they've lost and the lack of upside that I think they generally have at the tight end position.
Yeah, and even if they went a running back in the 1st or 2nd round, I just don't think that running back would find much success in this offense right now. It's not going to help them be any better this upcoming year. So definitely tight end for me. That is it for today's episode. Please give Kate a listen on the Locked On Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast with Marcus Mosher. Thank you again for joining us. We will be both back again tomorrow. Vinny has one more day off, and then we'll be back with us on Friday. But thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We will talk to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.